Everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you to Chinese for Affirmative Action for inviting me here tonight. And it's my pleasure to join you, and also as I see our District Attorney George Gascon and Mrs. Gascon here as well, to thank them for their time and interest in joining me here, as well as we make every attempt to not only engage our public, but also especially for the membership of CAA, an organization that I'm quite familiar with for quite some number of decades. It's my pleasure to do my best to answer what I can about what I'm doing and what I hope to do as mayor of the city, and of course, as we celebrate our Lunar New Year, to also congratulate all of you on the Lunar New Year, and hope that you will be greeted this year with great fortune. It is the Year of the Dragon. For me, that means that the Year of the Dragon, as the most powerful of all the zodiac animals, it also means that it's a year to confront your challenges, not hide from them, to take on more risk, and then to embrace innovation. And all of it means is basically don't be afraid and do good things. Don't be conservative, because that's what dragons do. And if you know a little bit about it, I'm very lucky because I'm the Year of the Dragon myself. With that, I'd be very glad to answer questions and then talk about the way the city's direction and the work that we're doing.
Well,
so the first question I want to ask you, Mr. Mayor, and I asked partly in jest, but partly serious as well. What do you think of Jeremy Lin?
He's a little taller than me. First of all, I'm really happy to see some of the news clips that have Jeremy Lin scoring as many points as he is in the last 3 games of the New York Knicks, and really having a great time there. And when you kind of see him in interviews, and I did that, I literally retaped the interviews to watch him. He was genuinely excited about the teams that he's on, and I look back and say, God, we didn't really use him that well. I think it's, when you look at basketball, you kind of understand that it's always about team chemistry. But we have in the Golden State Warriors kind of some pretty strong-headed guards. But at the same time, I kind of thought it was always premature for us to let go of Jeremy. He was a local guy, a local boy, and made good, and we probably could have been a little more patient and worked him in.
How much of the attention that he's getting do you think can be attributed to the fact that he's the first NBA player of Chinese and Taiwanese descent?
Well, I think clearly that is a huge part of his persona, his contribution, because people did come out in the Bay Area because he was Chinese American, and that is rare to see Chinese Americans in the sport of basketball. So I think that rarity and that excitement drew, I thought, it drew some considerable amount of business that the Warriors would never have had, but for his background.
So when I ask the question partly seriously, because I'm curious, you're the first Chinese American mayor of San Francisco. Do you think that part of that phenomenon of being the first of breaking barriers has applied to your time in public office?
Well, I certainly think so. I mean, I recognized it, and I've talked about this throughout the last year, that it was really special. One of those aspects, Vincent, is that you saw it in the election. I think we gained historic levels of voting participation because there were Chinese Americans and Asian Americans in general participating in the election, in a very serious election for the mayor of San Francisco. And they weren't just names. I think we was Phil Ting or David Chu or me or Leland Lee, and there was distinct contributions that we made that were all part of our cultural heritage. And I think that was recognized by the populace, and I believe that the turnout was very strong, the strongest, I think, in the history of this city as a result of that. So I recognize that right from the start. At the same time, the distinguishment that I had is I got to be interim mayor for 1 year almost 1 year before the election. And people got to see what I was able to do, and there was a tremendous appreciation from all parts and segments of San Francisco that registered the uniqueness of being the first Asian and first Chinese American mayor. So I think, Vincent, no doubt, there is that draw on it, that uniqueness about it. And then, as my good friend, Federal Judge Ed Chen and so many others who made historic moves themselves in history have always recognized, the backdrop is what San Francisco was 50, 75, 100 years ago. And the tremendous understanding and appreciation for generations of Chinese that came in those years, and the huge barriers that went right up to the generation my parents had to face. And those stories are always coming out with what was blocked, what couldn't be done, what laws have prevented us from being full citizens. You put that in the backdrop, that makes it even more significant that today there can be a Chinese American mayor.
And in addition to that, I think, it's our view, at least my view, that it also carries certain responsibilities. And I think that being from a history of immigration, a community of immigrants, that in addition to the excitement and the pride that some people feel about being able to identify with someone, that those of us who now have these opportunities, have these privileges, carry additional responsibilities to remember where we came from, and maybe empathize more with folks who are disadvantaged. Is that something you agree with?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, it's not just me, and it's not just Asians. It's everyone who understands the immigrant life and background. George Gascon has often talked about his background, and what he faced, and what his families faced, and what his communities faced. Same thing with me. When I was a lawyer here in Chinatown, there was family after family after family who had some complaint about things that didn't work well, and they faced extra burdens. And so when you're part of that community, there's absolutely no way you can escape the additional responsibilities to make sure that the barriers that you're very familiar with. I happen to be a civil rights lawyer, so I had to face those on behalf of the community. Now I get to make decisions, and it is recognizably very different the way I make decisions. I want more input. I'm never about being right or wrong. It's about getting more input from people to make sure that when we do make a decision, it's reflective of the different cultures, their input and ideas. That will make some mistakes, but for the most part, I think cultural sensitivity is even more expanded, and I think that we are more on the way of making better decisions that have a lot of community input and reflective of all the diverse communities as we become part of the decision making.
So, staying on the topic of immigrant rights and immigration, immigration reform has been stalled at the national level for quite some time. There's a number of advocates who've been frustrated by that and have tried to push, well, what can local government do to help speed that along, or how can we, at a local level, advance policies that would make things not just easier for immigrants here, but to change the whole xenophobic and anti-immigrant sort of rhetoric that we see in other parts of the country. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I never see immigration. I know that national leaders sometimes they operate in levels of fear or ignorance, and then we start seeing policies that are weird because they are a result of fear and ignorance. I think it's my job and the job of people in the Bay Area who understand issues of diversity, growing up in it as diverse as we have in populations, to offer the links that immigration has to everyday life. And so, for example, as you know, I am a huge proponent of job creation. And when you understand my arguments about job creation, I think there's a good majority of people in San Francisco that do appreciate this. We can't really be economically successful unless we recognize the international status of our city and the contributions of all of the diverse communities, and why it's so important that all the communities share in the job creation, and then create international linkages to business and to jobs. That, to me, is a huge contribution to the whole issue about immigration. Because in order to conduct successful business, no one ever comes to San Francisco to open up a San Francisco business. Most companies come to open up an international market. That they see San Francisco as a gateway. Yeah, we're going to have our mom and pop stores, and those would be great, but our new job creators have an international status. And I'm engaged with so many biotech companies, clean tech companies, technology companies, financial companies, and they're all about the international markets. And I think that our inability, our failure to break through on immigration thing stalls our economic activity. And once people understand that link, I think they can have an opportunity to go beyond some of these fearful statements that are being made about border protection and those sorts of things.
But it's interesting to me because, on the one hand, talking about those immigrants who maybe are able to contribute to these types of international companies is one thing, but we know here in Chinatown, we know throughout San Francisco that many immigrants, both documented and undocumented, are in places of work where they're very easily exploited. And oftentimes, because of their immigration status, they're fearful of coming out and talking about it. We see, for example, that the California Domestic Worker Bill of Rights wasn't signed by our governor, and so as a result, many immigrants who work in people's households, and they still aren't guaranteed a lunch break or overtime, breaks during the day. So I want to get back to this idea of, well, we do need to be more international, more global. But what about those immigrants who, realistically, in the next few years, may not benefit from it?
Well, I know in San Francisco, again, going back to even my background, we work really hard to make sure that workers' rights were protected here in San Francisco. Now, there may not be other cities as strong as ours, but I know that the values of the city and mayor and the board of supervisors have been very much together, and we funded pretty well our office labor standards, where they have bilingual investigators, and they've done really good in terms of getting at those jobs where there are a lot of monolingual immigrants to make sure they feel comfortable and safe and not face retaliation when they are able to complain. And that was the work that we did at the Asian Law Conference for many years and with Chinese for Affirmative Action. We needed to make sure people had a safe path to unveil facts that some of us might not be aware of in certain industries, whether it's a restaurant, a garment, bakeries, or other employment situations. So I think in San Francisco, there's been a good, solid tradition. And then we've got a DA and we've got good city attorneys who will go after people. And there are cases pending now that are good examples of how our city is strong in protecting the rights of workers. At the same time, too, when certain industrial things come about, and I said, for example, the healthcare workers, the home healthcare workers face huge cuts in the state level. Last year, I paid attention to that because I had good input from people like Leon Chow and the union folks who came and said, hey, Mayor, this is what's going to happen. And because of our openness, we took some of the labor information and we forced some priorities in the budget and we saved some good jobs. And so I think we have this level of conversation because there's good understanding of the immigrants and what they're faced with, and we're not going to let things happen that I think in past administrations may have just been kind of ignored. It's not, they may have taken the attitudes, it's not their problem. Everybody who is in our workforce is our problem, and so we'll do our best.
In many ways, San Francisco is a city of immigrants. I think protecting worker rights is a big part of that. But when you were city administrator, you also worked on a number of initiatives to not just protect immigrant rights, but to promote immigrant integration, creating a lot Office of Language Services, trying to improve our language access laws. Maybe you could speak to that and what we might expect over the next few years in the realm of language access.
I've had a chance in my past administrator, as city administrator, to work with Supervisor David Chu, get a lot of input from advocates and from social service agencies about what the barriers are, whether they were in access to public safety, access to business opportunities, access to employment, access to education, access to human services programs. And for many years, we've had this language access ordinance that I got to basically help the former Mayor Gavin Newsom devise a plan as to how to implement it appropriately. And you know, some of these laws, when they first begin, they have sometimes an inability to penetrate all of the different departments that ought to know it's their responsibility to carry out. I had that chance to do that. I think we did a good job to set a good foundation. And now that Naomi Kelly has taken over as city administrator, along with Adrian Pond at the Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs, they're working together to advise me as mayor as to making sure we hold accountable those departments that have front-facing programs and information that needs to have that language access totally open. And we want to use technology, we want to use personnel, bilingual personnel, we want to use cultural sensitivity, all of the tools that should be available to us to make our government even more of an ability to follow through, so that departments like the district attorney's domestic violence unit or consumer fraud unit, other places, don't miss an opportunity to protect more people or to get them involved in what they're doing. I'm gaining very good cooperation from departments, and Adrian's task is to give me statistics enough to know who's performing at those levels, because oftentimes we don't want to just depend upon anecdotal. And so I think CAA has been monitoring that, and we still have some ways to go. There are some departments that still need to step up, and we're using our budget to be able to help them prioritize. And while there have been cuts all these years, we're gonna probably get some resources out there, because I think the economy's become a little better and we need to do things better.
Well, I think it's a great example where your leadership can make a big difference. Ultimately, what needs to change, as you know, is the culture. And so that providing things in multiple languages is seen as just the normal way business is done. And I'm still struck, as much as San Francisco wants to be a town for tourists, and if you go to the airport, we don't offer information in other languages, even as we have visitors from all over the world. Same thing when you get into a cab. And I think some of this can change with technology, but it's one of those win-win situations where it's just moving it up on the list of people's priorities. So let's talk a little bit about job creation. As you know, we've worked a lot on at CAA, the local hiring for construction law and policy. Essentially what it does is says for city-funded contracts, a percentage of the jobs that are funded by San Francisco taxpayers are required to go back to San Francisco residents, starting off in its first year at 20% and increasing by 5 percentage points a year. So this year, we'll kick up to 25%. As you've been mayor and you've made this one of your top priorities, how would you assess progress on the local hiring law so far?
We will be, hopefully in the next 2 weeks, releasing the first year's data on it. Preliminary reports indicate that we're doing pretty well across all the trades. I'll wait for the numbers to come out and say that, but it does confirm the anecdotal information we've been getting, that our constant focus on hitting those numbers, which is helpful. When you have a numerical number out there, people pay attention. When you say good faith effort, nobody pays attention. And we learned that for many years. So we put a number out there, people do pay attention, and then we can gauge ourselves. So I think the performance, particularly of those departments that are engaged in the construction industry, have been fairly good. And it will be getting more challenging as the numbers increase, the goals increase. But I think we've created a good foundation, a good dialogue through the City Build program, through the community-based agencies that are helping us get workers ready, get them into And then with the unions, we still got some challenges there. We got some unions that still exist, but I kept the dialogue open, and I've always emphasized the positive, that it is to their interest, as well as the cities, to reach these goals. And I find that the unions that resist don't have an answer about the need to hire more people. They ultimately have to face that question. And so we're changing some of the culture of these established unions at the same time. And I think it deserves to be so, because I think some of their apprenticeship programs do have to open up a lot more to the skill sets that they need.
I think probably the most striking number, if you look at the construction trades, is that across the board, the percentage of women who are in these industries is well below 5%. And it's, the year 2012, and you have so many women who have additional responsibilities to work, to take care of their children, oftentimes single parents. And it's a big part of how city funds are used that women simply don't have access to. And I think when we look at local hiring, we look at encouraging San Francisco residents to get those jobs, it becomes much more diverse, not just along racial and ethnic lines, but also across gender lines.
And I think you know this, Vincent, that I wasn't just going to be satisfied with just the city-funded construction jobs. The whole philosophy of local hire should be a principle that operates under anything that we do in the city, whether we're helping Twitter open up their new headquarters on Market, or whether we're enticing a big development like Salesforce to come in and develop it for 14 acres, or hopefully the Warriors come in and build an arena, or any of those large projects.
America's Cup.
Exactly, America's Cup as well, big events. In fact, we've already negotiated some very good wording around America's Cup, and we're presenting that to the America's Cup Event Authority for possible adoption. That I've been championing this to be a principle that we operate under on everything that we do, and it may not be both possible and necessary to have enforceable goals in every instance because of the ways things are funded. But clearly we begin by saying this is something that if you want the city to support, then principally we have to get hiring goals that help us hire San Franciscans. The other thing that I'm learning is that there are some companies that exist in the city that we don't give enough credit to, and there are good examples. Companies like Wells Fargo and others who've been established for many years hire a lot of San Franciscans, and yet we don't recognize that, and we're always into the new stuff. I want to also make sure that I spend time thanking the companies who have hired hundreds, if not thousands, of San Franciscans almost on a daily basis, and then learn from them as to their recruitment practices, to reinforce those good, positive recruitment practices that do aim at our kids, aim at kids that are coming out of both high school and college, and recruiting them to be successful employees in the companies.
And local hiring in the way that it can concentrate resources back into neighborhoods by having a multiplier effect through the dollars that are expended by the city. Also obviously promotes better environmental practices by reducing commute times. And I think from what we've seen, you've commented already, is that a big part of it is simply moving away from this notion of, well, it's just a good faith effort. That if we can have measurable outcomes, numerical goals, and have some compliance around it, it makes a very big difference.
I know we are about to enter into an extremely exciting part of local hire. One is, you see that building just down on Kearny Street called our City College. I want to make sure that they are teaching the skills for the kinds of jobs that are going to be recruiting in San Francisco for the next 10 years. And to support our community college, to support the training that they should have, to meld their ability to teach with the labor crafts and all the other labor that should be involved in that. That's exciting. I think the other exciting part is these technology companies that are starting here that I talk about almost on a daily basis, they formed a partnership with me called San Francisco City, Citizens Initiative for Technology and Innovation. And the first thing they're doing is help me create job boards and offer a curriculum in technology training that will allow our high school kids and college kids to learn that training through a center that we're going to be about to establish, that they will pay for, so that they can have a steady recruitment of our San Francisco educated kids to go into the Twitters, the Zyngas, the Salesforce, the Autodesks, all these companies that are headquartered here. They've been recruiting from Berkeley and Stanford, so they got some brilliant minds now, but they're growing by leaps and bounds. And they want to make sure they have a steady group of engineers, software developers, marketing people that all come in, and we're going to make a big, huge contribution to it when we organize this employment training center.
You know, it's taken a long time, many decades, to get the City College campus built in Chinatown. And since that time, we've seen that the demographics of the city have changed dramatically. So not only do we have newcomer immigrants living in Chinatown, but we have them living throughout the city. And we project that many of the students who will go to the Chinatown campus actually live in the southeast sector, communities like Visitation Valley, Bay, Portland Valley. You know, CAA about 10 years ago opened up a satellite office out there, and the truth is that many of the community-based groups in Chinatown aren't yet in the southeast sector. But the challenges there, in some ways, are more difficult. It's much more diverse, under-resourced communities, and there can be a lot of tension when things aren't going well. What can be done to support immigrants, not just in Chinatown, obviously, but an approach that recognizes that there are these families that live throughout the city, particularly, you know, oftentimes neglected neighborhoods that you find along the southeast border.
First of all, I know for a fact that CAA was out there over 10 years ago in Visitation Valley, and it opened people's eyes because it was actually quite a unique move, but it was in recognition that there was a growing population. Just people didn't realize that that was where housing opportunities were, and it wasn't as congested and so forth. Well, the phenomenon is no longer a theory, it's the truth. There is Asian population is growing. It's well beyond Sunset, Richmond. It's in Visitation Valley, Bayview, Hunters Point. There are a lot of things that we have to do to make sure that everybody is welcome no matter where they live. Obviously, we have to pay attention to some of the basic things that we know, public safety. That is why we responded very strongly with the Community Ambassadors Program that would track these situations that Vincent, you and I had been made aware of all along the 3rd Street light rail. And I think the statistics show that when we get bodies out there that are language proficient, that are trained and working in concert with community policing, and it works. And I think that's why we're repeating that and building another program along Central Market. The same thing is happening there, and I think we're going to get the same positive results. Public safety, clearly paying attention by having both a mayor and a board of supervisors that understand all those different diversities that are going on in their communities, and making sure that we have adequate similar social service provisions in the Visitation Valley area as much as in the Bayview. I thought, for example, when the Children Youth Center located an office on 3rd Street, to be able to promote programs where racial tensions between African Americans and Asians could be talked about. When Joe Marshall stepped up with you and me to help be the fiscal agent for the Community Ambassadors Program, with Marlene Tran in her strong advocacy for more resources out there in Leland Avenue. All of these things, we have to have a government that's sensitive to and understanding what's going on. And it's going to be on all areas. It has to be education, public safety, social programs, employment opportunities, transportation. All of those we have to look at, making sure that we touch upon the new arrived immigrants there, the new groups that are there, try to reduce the tension, try to understand where there are job opportunities and get them anchored the way we have historically done for Chinatown, Japantown, Manila Town, and South Market, Koreatown in the Western District.
I think one of the most important pieces about that Community Ambassadors Program we designed is that, you know, we essentially tried to hire local residents, but across racial boundaries with multiple linguistic abilities, and to have folks share power a little bit. We opened it up via Facebook and Twitter and email for folks to email some questions, and we touched upon a lot of the questions that people ask you, but there were a couple that maybe I didn't think as much about, but a lot related to the budget process. But not so much what's happening in San Francisco, but what's happening in the state. And so the state is facing a $9 billion deficit, and the governor has a plan to essentially close the deficit about half through cuts and half through taxes. The half through cuts are almost exclusively on the board, child care subsidies, full-scope Medi-Cal, a whole number of the Cowboys program. And then the taxes, if they aren't approved by voters, are almost exclusively on education. $200 million cut from UC, $200 million cut from Cal State. One of the challenges is that local residents feel like, well, we can influence our local politics, but we have such a tough time with the state politics, where in some ways a lot of the action is happening. What's the responsibility of local leaders to be able to change that dynamic in Sacramento, or what can local residents do about it?
Well, clearly, local residents have a direct impact because you have representatives, state assemblymen, state senators. I mean, we have our local representatives. They ought to be out there advocating that the most valuable programs, the ones that we really depend on, ought not to be eliminated, ought not to be threatened. Obviously, education is one of the top priorities for our city. We're just beginning to feel some of the investments that we've made to turn the corner and get more schools at a level in which we're not fighting over the Lowells and the Washington Highs to be the only good schools in the city. We need to double or triple that effort. But then you turn around and then you hear the state wants to cut it or threaten to cut it if they don't get certain taxes done. Our local advocates have that responsibility, and I will voice it to them as the mayor. But I think the residents here, you vote the same people that I do, and you have the same voice. And so it is a strain sometimes on our local residents to have to make sure that not only do you pay attention to your election of a local supervisor or a mayor or some of the other offices, but then you also have to pay attention to who you promote to be your representative at the state assembly and at the senator level, and they need to be a strong voice for us as well.
And I think that part of it is that there needs to be more community education. Our community uses public schools, we use public services, and we have to find a way to pay for it. And whether that's revenue at the local level or at the state level or even the federal level. We oftentimes have a knee-jerk reaction to taxes, but it's clear that there's some, especially the very wealthy, who aren't paying their fair share of taxes.
And while we're doing this, and sometimes it may be extremely frustrating that whatever we do at the state level may not come down to us immediately. The hurt comes down fast, but the benefits always show up slowly. And so what I'm trying to do is build a San Francisco economy that is less dependent upon the state's action. And the only way we can do that is to form a stronger public-private partnership with the business community here in San Francisco. We have such successful businesses here, but if we don't work with them, then I think we will always then be subject to what the state does. I've gone to too many years in my 22 years of government that I really don't like what the state does, to be quite candid with you. And I want a San Francisco government that knows how to talk with all of its largest employers and successful companies and banks and institutions to forge an even stronger alliance locally so that we get them more involved in our educational challenges that we oftentimes have blamed the state for. In the next 2 or 3 years, I can't look to the state with any positive view that they're going to help me run the city. But I can feel very strongly that companies like Salesforce, Twitter, people that are going to be in the billions of dollars, that maybe they would like kids who are better educated to be part of their workforce. And so they might really feel it's their opportunity to invest in our schools. I want to promote that dialogue and get more local participation in that. Now, it doesn't bode well. This attitude may not be very good on a statewide basis, because I'm not suggesting we abandon the state school system. But I am saying that I can't afford to be dependent upon them if we're going to make strides for immediate generations of kids. I want our kids that are now in junior high school to feel that what we're doing today will lead to them having good jobs when they come out of college. Because I need for them to feel that going to college is worth it. If they don't, if they see, that there is no jobs out there for them, they're not going to feel very enthusiastic about spending 4 years and dedicating and focused on that. And it's a huge difference between someone who doesn't have a college education and someone who does.
Some of the other emails we got asked about civil service and working for the city government, suggesting that, there's too much cronyism, there's too much favoritism, and that the vendor process is too slow. How well does city government work? Does it need wholesale change, or is this mostly sort of critiques from people who are giving fodder to folks who want less government involvement?
Well, we always, I've been for 22 years, and I would never say the government works perfectly. It doesn't. I've been part of bureaucracies that I disliked, but then the city attorney says, well, you got to do these things because we wrote these laws, we passed these laws. And I said, who was that nut that passed that law? I would criticize some of those regulations that we passed as being inefficient. And so we do always have to have a constant paying attention to reforming those laws that we felt were important to pass, but then are causing us to be inefficient. And this is why I'm forming a stronger relationship with the private business sector to help us see how we can be more efficient in the delivery of services for the city. This SF city that I talked about is about 100 companies that immediately said they want to join us and help us figure out what regulations are important to keep, which ones are not important, and just get in the way of progress. We have this relationship with this nonprofit called Code for America, which is a technology-oriented nonprofit that's going to help us look at all the business decision-making processes that we have in the city, whether it's permits or going through regulations to get qualified for a certified business, all of the different processes that can be reviewed with an eye towards getting them to move faster and less duplication in the different bureaucracies, and then who is the lead in all those different departments who can then expedite these things. Because the more expedited we can do, the faster we get these jobs out.
We wanted to open up to questions, and I think we have some folks from CAA who have microphones, so if you'd like to ask a question, raise your hand and they'll come around to you. But while they do that, I wanted to close with maybe some an encouragement for you that you could respond to. When I opened about Jeremy Lin, it's clear that as an Asian American, he's receiving so much attention. The result of that attention is this additional responsibility in terms of how he conducts himself. I think one thing that I've noticed that elected officials often look at their role in terms of running the government and passing the laws, but what they don't fully appreciate is, for those of us on the outside, what tremendous leadership responsibility there is to use the so-called bully pulpit. And that as we move into this era where we have elected officials who are more and more like us, where we have an African-American president of the United States, we need to also start talking about not just what we look like, but really what we stand for. And so I suppose the question is, what do you think this generation of Asian American elected officials, including yourself, should be known for in terms of what we stand for and what the values of those are?
Well, there's going to be some things that come to me naturally, and there'll be some things that I think there's an opportunity to showcase. One of the things that I've learned in my 22 years of government is, with the rise of more Asian faces, are we going to be the same kinds of political people that other people were? What is usually expected of me, for example, as an Asian American, is that I focus on Asian American issues. I don't think that's often sometimes to be as important as if we're going to be leaders as Asian Americans, we also have to talk about other ethnicities' challenges and what they're facing, and our sensitivity to opening up doors for them. You know, when I talk about what's happening in the Black community, what's happening in the Latino community, or the Korean community, or the gay and lesbian community, it's odd sometimes. People say, oh, God, you're Asians, but you know that much about what's going on in the Black community. And yes, because if I'm going to be a leader, I have to be a leader for everybody. And I think that takes a little bit of training for people in the Asian community to make sure that as you grow up, if you want to be a politician in such a diverse place as San Francisco, you better know what's going on in the African American community. You better know what's going on with the unfinished agenda, or what happened when there's all this statistics about who's going to jail, why are there no Black males, parents, what's going on with the Black family. I think we need to understand that. I think we need to understand other races in order to be a leader.
Well, I think, what we're seeing, this is something that Mark advised me when I started at CAA. He said, well, the whole point of being Asian American is to understand what it means, what it feels like to be disadvantaged, so that we can help other people who are similarly disadvantaged. And I think is an ethical construct for what it means to be Asian American. It's much more inspirational than just the idea of having more and more public faces that look like us. So let's open up to the floor for some questions.
Excuse me. I have a question. When the T line, the third Street line was originally proposed, it was supposed to terminate at the, I think the Bay Shore Station at Caltrans, so where it is now. And then later on, they cut it off on the 3rd Street near the Cow Palace, saying that I think it was the lock company there refused to allow them to use the land to make the T line to the Caltrans station. Now that the lock company is gone, and that's basically a large empty field out there, is the city proposed to finish the T line all the way to the Caltrans station, the Bay Shore station?
There has not been a proposal for that. It should be revisited, but I will tell you that the Schlage lock site is there is a developer there. They were working under redevelopment programs until that agency was eliminated by the state. They are still proceeding with their development with the private funding. So they are moving forward, and they just sat down and reported to me that they wish to move forward with the city's help. They obviously have a little bit more fiscal challenge to the development, but they have a plan, and they presented that plan to us. Meanwhile, I'm looking forward to connecting up 3rd Street with Central Subway. That's what we're working on right now.
Mayor Reed, I have a couple questions to ask you. First of all, I was wondering what your thoughts are about the tragic death of Private Danny Chen, who committed suicide in Afghanistan. And the second question I have is, have you signed a petition for OCA, the online petition that's from the OCA in New York?
Well, on the first question about Danny Chen, I believe you're referring to the individual who was a victim of harassment, and then circumstances occurred where, because of that intense harassment, there was a committing of suicide. I mean, I think it's horrible circumstance, and obviously I've read, like you and maybe others in the room, to how devastating those circumstances were, and the need for military brass as well as others to pay attention to those circumstances and not allow that to occur. I believe there is an investigation going on primarily because of the advocacy that's going on with that case and from the family to really investigate the people responsible for allowing that to happen, and could they have stopped it. These are the sorts of things that I would support greatly, is the full investigation to identify what could have been done to stop that harassment. I hate to see that, and obviously the military needs to make sure that its members are all adhering to principles of responsibility to their fellow people in the armed forces. With respect to the OCA, I'm not familiar with that, so I'd be glad to take a look at it, but I haven't signed anything on behalf of the OCA yet.
Maybe one more question.
I will speak the Cantonese, okay. 我想問咧，頭先我聽咗你好多嘅好有嘅願景，但係我睇到一個問題就係我哋作為個家長，我睇唔到點樣去幫助我哋嘅小朋友將來進入大學，因為而家我哋校區一路都喺嗰個財赤裏面，咁是否會唔會幫助我哋喺個校區裏面資助或者係點樣去幫我哋咧？
I have listened to Mayor Lee's inspirational prospect about the city. In terms of the physical support of the school district, I don't see any future for our students. So, what could be done to remediate this situation?
The school district has been a victim of state funding crises for many, many years. San Francisco City has been helping the school district to the tune of giving from our general fund some $30 million each year to help them, which is why, for example, last year when we gave them money to help them, we were one of the few school districts throughout the whole state where the school district did not lay off the teachers. So we are very serious about our money. $30 million is hard to come by, but you as taxpayers are allowing me to help our school district by supporting our rainy day fund. That's what we have. This year, they're going to ask for money again because the state's cutting them. So we are deliberately helping our school district survive those funding cuts. Now, that's just one thing. There's many more ideas that I have. For example, now that I'm mayor, I'm working with Norman Yee, who's the new board president. I want him to look at all of the empty school sites throughout the city, and I want him to work with the city to develop those sites or to sell them and make money, and use that money to then improve the school system. There are a lot of sites where the school is empty, they're not using the land, and we have developers who want to pay to put businesses and housing on those sites. So I need to make the school district, see, the school district is not a business entity right now. If I own that kind of property, and if you own that kind of property, any of you have been in business, you'd be in a business transaction right away. But the school district is not a business thing, so I want them to partner with the city. I have a whole economic development division of the mayor's office to work with them so that no school site sits empty and vacant and underutilized, where there's so many companies who want to come in and buy it or lease it, and then the school district makes money and the city makes money. So I think we need to do a lot more of that use of the property and develop. And this is where I say public-private partnerships are very good. So we need to have a higher level of financial support for the school district.
And if I can add in, I know this question is directed to the mayor, but it seems to me that many of these problems have been a long time in the making. And then we've gutted our public education system in California ever since we passed something called Prop 13. And then ultimately we're going to need to overturn that so we can start funding not just K through 12, but our community colleges, Cal State, our UCs. All those education programs, all those schools have been starved essentially by Prop 13. The other thing I think is that we haven't gotten the help from the federal level that we may have had in the past. And essentially because of the Bush tax tax cuts and some very expensive and also, in my view, unnecessary wars. Right, so I think that the mayor talked about, well, what are some things we can do to get around that, but as a community, we need to also see the bigger picture of how we ended up in some of these very, very difficult structural problems. I know that the mayor is on a very tight schedule. I want to thank the mayor for coming today, and I hope all of you will join me in a round of applause for him. I do have some sad news to share, but I'd like to adjourn the meeting in memory of May Louie. May Louie, many of you know, is a long-time Chinatown and community leader in San Francisco, and we were very sad to learn that May passed away earlier this week. There will be information forthcoming about the services, but we've been in touch with her family. She appreciates all of us keeping her family in our thoughts. Please feel free to stick around for light reception. There's some food and some drinks. And again, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for joining us. Thank you.